The following program was produced by WDIV, a post-Newsweek station, and is designed for viewing by children ages 8 to 12. All post-Newsweek children's program policies and special commercial policies apply to its presentation.
Today on Kidbits, we'll learn about the center of gravity.
Do you know where your center of gravity is? Maybe I should ask, do you know what your center of gravity is? You give up?
And on our second feature...
Did you ever see a magician grab hold of a tablecloth on a fully set table, utter a few magic words, and pull the cloth out from underneath the table? Well, there's no magic to it, just the laws of gravity and inertia.
Next, we have...
Tightrope walkers have another secret to help them out, and it's gravity.
Then...
Here's a challenge for you. I have a line of checkers here organized into 3 sets of 3. How can I change the color of these groups to either all brown or all white? Now, that doesn't sound like a very difficult question unless we make the rule that you can only touch one checker.
And on the last Kidbits feature...
Gravity is the attraction of 2 large heavenly bodies to one another, like the Earth and the Moon. They're attracted to each other because of gravity.
Kidbits will return after these messages. We now return to Kidbits.
Hello, and welcome to Kidbits. Do you know where your center of gravity is? Maybe I should ask, do you know what your center of gravity is? You give up? Well, here's the answer. The center of gravity of any object, including you, is the point that represents the mean position of the mass. Well, in other words, it's the point where all your weight is centered. Or it's your balance point. That's a good way to think of it. It's handy to know what center of gravity means and how to find it. And it's really very easy. Once you understand, you can do some neat tricks for your friends. We can try some experiments today to figure this whole thing out. And all we'll need is a meter stick or a yardstick, some paper, some string, a ruler, and some thumbtacks. Let's start with our meter stick or our yardstick. Do you think I could find the center of gravity of this stick with my eyes closed? It's easy. All you have to do is balance the stick on 2 outstretched fingers like this. Close your eyes and slide your hands towards each other slowly. When your hands meet in the center, open your eyes, and you'll find out that your fingers are on either side of the exact center of this stick. This is the center of gravity, or the balance point of this stick. I can balance it just like this. The weight is equal on both sides of this point. Let's look for the balance point of a piece of paper, like this. Now, this is a square sheet of paper, so there's an easy way to do it. All you have to do is take a ruler and a pencil and draw diagonal lines from opposing corners of the piece of paper, like this. The point where these 2 lines cross is the center of gravity of this sheet of paper. You can take a pin, push it right through the center here, and it'll spin nicely on that very same point. Now, what if our sheet of paper were shaped like this? It's not as easy, but there is a way to do it. You need a string with a thumbtack on one end and a small weight on the other. Push the pin through the corner of the piece of paper. Look for a vertical wall or a corkboard, if you have one, to nail it up on. Pin this to the wall and draw a line that matches the string on the piece of paper, just like this. Do this for 2 other corners of the piece of paper. Any 3 corners will do. And when you're done, the point where all 3 of these lines intersect is the center of gravity of this very unusually shaped piece of paper. We'll be back right after this to try some more gravity fun. Did you ever want to have a pet butterfly of your very own that could come down and land right on your fingertip? Well, using what we know about the center of gravity, we can make our own pet butterfly to land on your finger or even on your nose. All you'll need are some sheets of construction paper, a couple of round toothpicks, and some tape, some glue, and maybe a couple of dimes or small washers. The first thing you have to do is draw your butterfly. Draw it on a folded piece of paper like this. Draw 1/2 of the butterfly. Make the wings larger than the body of the butterfly. This is important for later on. Now you can cut out your butterfly, and when you're finished, it'll look just like this. Now, this is a good point to decorate your butterfly with crayons or marking pens, but try and make him symmetrical. Whatever you put on this side, put on this side as well, just like in real life. When you're done decorating your butterfly, turn him over and tape a toothpick right in the center of the butterfly with about a 1/2 inch of tape, a 1/2 inch of toothpick showing above the head of the butterfly, just like that. Now, here's the tricky part. You have to take your small washers and glue them to the front of the wings of the butterfly. They should be in the same point on the wing on both sides of the wings, just like this here. There you have it. Your butterfly is all ready for a test flight. Pick him up and see if he'll balance on your finger, just like that. He works because the toothpick represents the center of gravity for the butterfly. Did you ever see a magician grab hold of a tablecloth on a fully set table, utter a few magic words, and pull the cloth out from underneath the table? Well, there's no magic to it, just the laws of gravity and inertia. And there's a big difference between magic and science, and this is science. Sir Isaac Newton, an English scientist who lived during the late 1600s, stated that a body at rest tends to remain at rest unless some outside force comes to act upon it. Well, that's the law of inertia. And once that body starts in motion, it tends to remain in motion in a straight line unless an outside force acts upon it to change its direction or motion. We can demonstrate the law of inertia with some strips of paper, a $50, and an empty glass. Newton's law said a body at rest. In this case, our body at rest will be this $50 at rest on the edge of this glass, just like this. For our experiment, we're going to put a strip of paper underneath the $50 at rest on the edge of the glass. Now, you remember our magician and the tablecloth? What do you think will happen if I try to remove this piece of paper from underneath the coin? Will the coin stay put, or will it follow the paper? Well, if I want it to stay put, and I do, I have to remove it very quickly so that no force acts upon it. Here's an idea. I'll use a ruler to get really quick action on the paper. Let's give it a try. Are you ready? There. The coin stayed put because of inertia. The body at rest stayed at rest because no force came to act upon it. Let's try a different version of the same experiment. For this experiment, you need to make a paper loop. Roll up a piece of paper and glue it together. Here's one that I made a little earlier. You may need to use 2 thicknesses of paper to make it strong enough to support a coin balanced on top of it. Now, what do you think will happen to this coin if I try to remove this paper hoop? Inertia says that the coin will stay put, and then gravity will take over and draw the coin down into the glass. Let's give it a try. Using our ruler again, strike the hoop from the inside of the glass, like that. And the coin fell down into the glass. Gravity drew it downward. We'll be back right after this to try some further investigations into the law of inertia. Although inertia and gravity are very closely related, occasionally some pretty surprising things can occur. In this next experiment, we're going to use inertia to overcome gravity. All you'll need is a block of wood, some twine, some thread, and a pair of scissors. Cut 4 pieces of thread about 14 to 18 inches long with your scissors. Now, tie the twine tightly around your block of wood so that it goes around both sides of the block of wood, like this one here. Now, we need a way to hang this block of wood so it's freely suspended. You might have to take 2 chairs and put a brace across the back and hang it from that. Or if you happen to have a ring stand at home, like I do right here, you can use this. Tie your block of wood up so it's freely suspended by the thread. Tie the thread on tightly. When you're doing this experiment, be careful of your hands. We don't want the block of wood to drop on your hands and give you a bruised knuckle. And I have 1 string hanging from the bottom, 1 string on either side. Now, I'm going to pull very carefully and slowly on this lower string. Which string do you think will break? If you pull very, very gradually, very slowly, keep adding more and more strength to it, the upper string broke. The lower string is still intact. Now tie it back up one more time, and this time, instead of pulling very gradually, pull very, very quickly. Make a very sharp, sudden motion with the lower string. It's a good thing I had my hands out of the way there, or I'd have a fat knuckle right now. Okay. Once it's tied on there good and tight, take hold of your lower string, your second lower string, and this time pull very quickly, very sharply. And the lower string broke this time. What does inertia have to do with which string broke? Well, when we pulled on the lower string, the resistance of the block to movement caused the lower string to snap. Have you ever been to the circus and seen a tightrope walker? It seems as if you would need exceptional balance and very sticky feet to walk on a thin rope suspended so high up in the air. Well, good balance would of course be important, but you don't need sticky feet. Tightrope walkers have another secret to help them out, and it's gravity. That's right. They use gravity to their advantage. We can demonstrate this to ourselves by making our own tightrope walker out of a cork, 2 forks, a wooden match without the head, and a piece of string to walk on. Let's take a look at this sketch right here of a tightrope walker. You see this long pole that they're holding in their hands? You notice the ends of the pole sag below the point that they're standing on the wire. Well, the ends of this pole are very heavily weighted, and by virtue of the fact they hang below the wire, they lower the center of gravity of this tightrope walker to a point below the wire. So in effect, he's being held down onto the wire by the heavy pole in his hands. For our very own tightrope walker, take your match and break off the head and throw it away. We don't need the head. You may ask an adult to help you prepare your match. Take your cork and stick the match down into the cork, just like this. You may need to take a nail first and get a little hole to start with, because sometimes the corks are a little tougher than you might think. Now, take the match and carve a V-shaped notch in it with your fingernail in the other end, just like this. Now, take the 2 forks and very carefully insert them in opposite sides of the cork so that they're even, so that they're on both sides and that the handles hang down about the same amount on each side. This takes a little bit of energy. Now test the balance of your tightrope walker. If he's balanced properly, he'll balance on your finger. This one needs a little bit of adjustment. I'd have to adjust the hammer or the handles of the forks so they hang down a little bit better. Here's one I made a little earlier that has pretty good balance. You can see him balancing on my finger. Now we're ready to try him on the tightrope. Take your string, hold one end in your mouth, and balance the tightrope walker right on there. Now, by raising and lowering the ends of the string, we can get our tightrope walker to walk back and forth for us. He uses the same secret of balance that a real tightrope walker does. The weight of the handles lowers the point of balance to a point below the string. Gravity takes over and holds him right onto the string. An amazing feat of balance, and now you know. We'll be back right after this with a more amazing feat of balance. Not all balancing items have to be symmetrical for them to work. Symmetrical means the same on both sides. Our tightrope walker was symmetrical because if you cut him in half, each side of the tightrope walker would be the same. We can do an amazing feat of balance using these 3 unlikely items: a hammer, a ruler, and some twine. Now, how would you arrange these 3 items so that they balanced by a single point? Well, remember our tightrope walker? We discovered that his secret of balance was to lower the center of gravity below the point of suspension. We can do the same thing with our hammer and our ruler. Tie a loop of twine in a small loop about 2 inches across. Slide the loop down over the hammer handle and around the ruler like this. Set it down on the table to get it adjusted so that they all are connected like this. Now, while you're doing this experiment, be very careful of the hammer. You don't want it to drop off and fall on your toes. You need to look around and find a place where there's an overhang, like a kitchen table, that you can hang this whole contraption on. If we've done everything right, our hammer will suspend itself just by the twine and the ruler. This amazing feat of balance is a good one to show your friends. When they ask you how it's done, explain that the center of gravity is below the point of suspension and that gravity is holding them together. A tightrope walker and an amazing hanging hammer. And now you know their secret. Hello, here's a challenge for you. I have a line of checkers here organized into 3 sets of 3. How can I change the color of these groups to either all brown or all white? Now, that doesn't sound like a very difficult question unless we make the rule that you can only touch 1 checker. Now it's a little tougher question, and yet there is an easy answer if you understand the law of inertia. To prove it, we'll need 10 checkers, 6 of one color and 4 of another, and you have to arrange them like this here. 2 dark ones and 1 light one in this group, 2 light ones and 1 dark one in this group, and 2 dark ones and 1 white one in this group. You'll have 1 checker left over to work with. Now, our checkers need to be in a straight line with each of the 3 groups touching each other. So they're touching there and they're touching there. Take your extra checker and put it on the end down here. Get down here where you can see it, line it up, and snap that checker into the line. If you look carefully, what you saw was 1 checker from one group jump to the next group, and 1 from this group jump to this group. This effect, a chain reaction, was caused by the inertia of the first checker striking this group. That action carried through this 2 checkers, and then the end one went into this group. Carried through these 3 checkers, and then one went into this group over here. And finally, the last one was sent away. We can reverse the process and make our three groups the same way they were when we started by lining them all up again, making sure they're touching, putting the extra one on this end, and sending it into the group like that. And those are the three groups we started with right there. What do you think would happen if we used one checker to set off two other checkers? Well, the law of inertia says that the checkers will continue to move in a straight line unless another force comes to act upon them. Well, there is another force acting on them. It's friction. Friction between the checker and the tabletop causes the checkers to slow down quite a bit. If not for friction, we could create an endless chain reaction of checkers. Experiment with your checker chain reaction. See how many different patterns you can create. We'll be back right after this message to try some more checker tricks. Do you still have your stack of checkers ready? We're going to try a few more tricks. I made a stack of checkers here that are all white ones with one brown one on the bottom. Now, how can I remove this one brown checker without touching the stack and without touching the checkers at all? Here's a hint. You can use a ruler. Well, do you have any ideas now? Well, here's one possible way. By moving the ruler very quickly, you can slice underneath the stack, and the lower checker will move out. Inertia will hold the stack together for just a very brief second, and then it'll drop down. Let's give it a try. Ready? Just like that there. The one checker was removed, and the other ones stayed in line. Here's another experiment you can do with your checkers. Put one white one or one brown one second from the bottom of a group about 6 checkers tall. Now, your challenge is to remove this white one without touching the checker or the stack using only this extra checker. The rules are the same. The stack has to stay intact, and the checker has to be removed. Do you have any ideas? Well, this one takes a little bit more than inertia. You need a little backspin. This trick also takes a lot of practice. Don't give up if it doesn't work for you right away. I've been practicing all day. I'm going to take this checker right here and snap it downward, backwards. The action of the snap will carry it forward. It'll knock this checker out, and the backspin will cause it to roll away from the stack. Let's give it a try and see what happens, okay? Sooner or later, right there you have it. The law of inertia, and with a little backspin thrown in. Inertia says that a body tends to stay at rest until it is disturbed. And that's what we were doing here, demonstrating the law of inertia today with checkers. Try more experiments for yourself. How much do you know about gravity? Are you sure there is such a thing? Do you know how it's measured? Does the moon have gravity? Who discovered gravity? And finally, why doesn't gravity affect astronauts in outer space? Don't be surprised if you couldn't answer all these questions. They've been asked by scientists for hundreds of years, and the answer is just being found today. Let's start with, what is gravity? The answer: gravity is the attraction of two large heavenly bodies to one another, like the Earth and the Moon. They're attracted to each other because of gravity. The amount of gravity is determined by the size of the bodies and their distance apart. Well, that's great for planets, but how about you and I? Well, the measurement of gravity upon us is our weight, however many pounds or kilos that we weigh. Sir Isaac Newton, an English scientist who lived during the late 1600s, was the first person to reason out gravity and apply mathematical formulas to it. He predicted that the moon would have 1/6 the gravity of the Earth because it is 1/6 in size. When the astronauts arrived there in 1969, they found out that Newton was correct. If you'd like to know what you weigh on the moon, divide your weight by 6. Let's see, I weigh 72 kilos on Earth, so I would weigh 12 kilos on the moon. Speaking of the moon and space travel, did you ever wonder why astronauts are weightless when they're in outer space? We can demonstrate why this is by using a large rubber band and 2 clothespins. Clip the clothespins on the rubber band like this here, one on the top and one on the bottom, with the bulge in the rubber band in between. Now you notice that the lower pin stretches the rubber band. Now, to prove that objects are weightless in space, hold the pins above your head and drop them, and watch very carefully when you drop them. As they fall, you notice that the rubber band contracted while they fell. That meant that the lower pin was exerting no pressure or no weight upon the rubber band. It's weightless. Let's look at a picture taken while the clothespins were falling. You notice in this picture that the rubber band has contracted. The lower pin is weightless. This is the same effect that astronauts suffer when they're in outer space. as they fall between gravitational fields in outer space, they become weightless. We'll be back right after this with another experiment in gravity. This experiment is an example of the law of inertia, which states that an object tends to remain at rest unless some outside force comes to act upon it. This is a pretty tricky experiment, and if you're going to try it at home, you may want to ask one of the adults in your house to help you set it up. For this experiment, you'll need 4 hard-boiled eggs, 4 wide water glasses, 4 paper spools, and a flat, light tray. Fill the glasses about half full with water and set the clear or light tray down on top of it. Place the paper spools directly over the glasses, and very carefully balance 4 eggs on top of the paper spools. Now, I'm using hard-boiled eggs here just in case that the eggs decide to move before I get them all set up. Once you get it all set up, the challenge is to remove the tray without disturbing the eggs. If you do it correctly, the eggs will fall harmlessly into the water below. Are you ready for this attempt? And now, for the first time on television anywhere, a demonstration of Newton's third law. Let's give it a try. Just like that. Perhaps you'd like to look at that one on instant replay. You'll notice that as I struck the side of the tray very hard, the tray began to move. The friction between the tray and the spool carried the spools away with it. The eggs were temporarily suspended in space for the briefest moment, then gravity pulled them down into the water. The water absorbed the impact of the eggs falling. Perhaps I'll try it with fresh eggs next time. What do you think? Again, if you'd like to try this at home, ask for help from an adult to help you set it up. Inertia and gravity, 2 important principles of science, and now you know.
Kidbits will return after these messages. We now return to Kidbits. Experiments seen on this program were developed in conjunction with the Detroit Science Center, where the excitement of science is seen daily. On our next Kidbits show, we'll learn about music.
Music is communication, and you can make music on almost anything you could find around the house.
And on our second feature,
how does sound travel through the air from your television to your ear? Can you see sound? Can you feel sound? Just what is sound?
Next we have,
why do sounds sound so different? Why does a tuba sound so much different than a trumpet, for instance? Or why do thunder and a bass drum sound almost alike?
Then,
have you ever watched a symphonic orchestra playing a great piece of music and imagined yourself as one of the players? What instrument did you think that you were the master of?
And on the last Kidbits feature,
what's the difference between sound, noise, and music? Think about what these 3 words mean.
See you next week.